What's up, Moff Gideon fans? On today's show, we're digging deeper into episode 3, season 3. We're going backwards in time. Season 3, episode 7 of The Mandalorian. Welcome to the Story Geek Show, officially part of the Orange Grove 55 network. Let's dig deeper into episode 7. With me to talk about episode 7 is over to my left on my screen. You're probably the right on your screen, Mr. OG55. How are you, sir?
I am doing really, really good. I don't know what's going on with the lighting in here. For some reason today, I just look really orange. So I guess I'm on brand today, right? Orange Grove is really orange.
Yeah, so it's either the orange lightsabers that you have on the wall now that we have orange lightsabers in the world of Star Wars. Or you're just a big Trump fan, right? That's Dre's joke right there. I just have to give credit to Dre.
Yep, absolutely.
It's good to have you a part of this one. Where can people find you if they want to chat with you?
You can find me right here on YouTube at Orange Grove 55, talking shop with these two amazing gentlemen. You can also find me on Twitter at Orange Grove 55, where I am opining quite frequently about parks, movies, film, C-suite, all that good stuff. So check me out. And Jay, again, want to thank you so much for having me on Story Geek talking Mandalorian.
Oh, absolute pleasure. We had a bunch of people that really wanted to join us this week, and all of them are doing fun things on a Friday night. Not that this isn't fun, because we're about to talk about The Mandalorian, and that's fun too, but they had other things that were happening, so we will catch up with them in the near future. Also joining us today, though, a little bit under the weather, but a dedicated Star Wars fan, a dedicated producer of the show.
Yes.
Mr. Vashkai. Dre, how are you, sir?
Doing, better. Not the absolute best I've ever been, but hey, you're talking Mando, so how bad can it really be? Pretty good stuff here, so I'm really, really glad to be a part of it. And if anybody wants to follow me at home, you can go do so right there at Vashkai. Just located right below my avatar there, where you can keep up with, as Christine Wilson McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there. And if you want to see me, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55. We have some amazing shows, including the one you're watching right now with Story Geeks with Jay, where we are covering every single Mandalorian episode as they come out, which we will do for this episode in just a moment. Orange Grove 55, an Orange Nerd, hosted by the person above me, Orange Grove himself. Orange Nerd, we talk about everything going on in C-Suite, and trust me, there is a lot of that going around and how that blends with the parks. Interestingly enough, we have a channel for that too, Citrus Corner. We talk about everything at Walt Disney World, and my own show as well, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh, right from the Grove. Now, here, let me see if I can actually pull this off here. Give me a moment, guys. Hang on.
Ooh, suspense. We need a drum roll.
I know. We need some kind of. Thank you. For doing that whole thing there. Well, as you know, guys, this episode was really interesting because, it gave you kind of a state of the galaxy, and it provided some clarity to things, but also some questions to some things. And so that's why for this episode, I wanted to go ahead and do something really special for you guys. So give me just a second.
Cool.
Also want to give a shout out to BJ Vincent in the chat. What's up, BJ? He tells Dre to get better soon, and so does Matthew Muir.
Absolutely.
What's up, Matthew? Thanks for joining us in the chat. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys on a Friday night. Now, Matthew, I don't know what time it is for you. It might be 4 a.m. for all I know, but it's probably a different time zone altogether.
Yeah, Matthew's in the UK, so he's in a whole different time zone, Matthew. We appreciate you, brother. You I know a lot of times when we're doing these shows, it's late in the evening over there, and sometimes early morning even. So we appreciate you, brother. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us.
Yeah. He might be over there having his English breakfast for all we know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, guys, you know that the the Force sometimes can be a pathway to things that some might consider to be
unnatural.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
the reveal.
Yeah, that's sick, Dre. That's
Dre.
sick. Oh, that was worth it. That was dope, dude.
There you go. That's what's
the wait.
going on today. Got to talk about some Mandalorian season 3, episode 7. This chapter, what is it? 23? Is that right? Called
so.
Spies. Very, very interesting.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Good
sir.
stuff. It is good stuff, and we are going to jump into it. We have full dark side Dre on our hands. What could that possibly mean? We don't know yet. We don't know. We don't know. All right, so we're going to jump into these topics, and we also want to hear from you guys. So
Awesome.
sometimes we get so far into this discussion that we're not able to get to your questions until after we get through the questions that I have previously prepared, and that's totally fine. But we also want to hear your opinion along the way. So, for example, the first question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, the question that I ask every week, what would you rate this particular episode? Let us know what you would rate this particular episode in the comments live over there so that we can talk about it in general. Dre, I will start with you because you had this, you dressed up for this, you had the lightsaber for this. How can I not go right back to you and throw it over to you, sir? Scale of 1 to 10, what do you think?
I think this episode's a solid 9. You know, there are some minor issues with it that keep it from that just illustrious 10 right there. And we have to reserve that for the best, right? So I think this is a 9.5, somewhere right there. This is a very, very, I thought, a really strong episode. It really tied a lot of things that I think some people consider to be what is it? Not unnatural, but just unconnected, right? Just this season it felt like they were throwing a lot out here, and look, Dave Filoni has done this in the past, especially with his animated shows, where certain things feel like they're kind of thrown together, certain things feel like they're kind of just thrown in there, filler, whatever, but it all kind of ties back in and really amounts to an amazing payoff. And I think that's what we're seeing here, and we got confirmation that might actually be occurring in key scenes of this. We also got kind of it almost kind of evoked that kind of boardroom scene in A New Hope, where we have like the state of not just the galaxy, but the state of the Empire or the Imperial Remnant in this time period. And we got to see some interesting figures. For example, Hux's dad is there. We got to hear about Thrawn, which is nice that Star Wars Celebration debuted the trailer for Ahsoka that revealed Thrawn. Now we actually get to see, hey, that's connected to this as well. It looks like he's going to be the heir to the Empire up until Palpatine's return as a part of this Project Necromancer. So that's very, very interesting, right? But we also got to see the fruition of Bo-Katan and Din Djarin's kind of mutual relationship, right? That's going on here, and how Din Djarin swore his fealty to Bo-Katan and her cause. That's a really kind of interesting thing because, he's obviously a child of the Watch, right? He's part of this kind of, what would you want to say, tribe that has been, historically in the past, they've seen Bo-Katan with some skepticism. So that was kind of interesting to see. Obviously, this is the culmination of their adventures. But we also got to see Moff Gideon return as the big baddie. He seems to do this, every single season, where you don't see him, and then boom, he winds up in the last episode right there. So that's kind of harkening back to Mandalorian seasons of the past.
Speaking of him, real quick, was that the first time we saw him with the helmet?
Correct. That is. That's the first time, and there were allusions to him maybe being like having Mandalorian armor or having Mandalorian tech or having access to it, and it looks like Bo-Katan and Din Djarin and Grogu weren't the only ones on Mandalore harvesting what they could. So that's a very interesting thing as well.
Absolutely.
So Dre gives it a 9, 9.5. BJ Vincent in the chat gives it a 9. The Rogue Attraction, what's up, Tom? Tom says it is the best episode of the season thus far. He's not going to give us a number. He's going to let us wait and see what he thinks about it later.
Yeah,
nice.
But I do think this is the best episode of the season. OG, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Rogue Attraction on that. It's by far the best episode of the season. I really, really like this. It did a lot of different things here. One of my favorite things it did was it progressed Grogu. I've been saying a lot in a lot of these reviews, a lot of these shows that we've been doing. Grogu needs to step it up. It was cool the first season, maybe even second season, for him to be the cute little sidekick that did and sort of protecting, but he's trained with Luke Skywalker. He needs to become more than just the cuddly little sidekick. And when he got that IG-11 suit, okay, I thought that was dope as hell. And and the cool thing about it was how that whole thing came about. Like, Din Djarin was like, no, he's too small. He's too young. He can't do it. And Grogu was like, no, Dad, I'm good. I got this, And that was the first time you really saw Grogu kind of push back against Din, right?
One must not speak unless one knows.
Right, exactly. And so it was really cool to see that. It was really cool to see Grogu sort of grow enough, right? A little bit. I thought that was pretty dope. Good character development there. That's been what I've been wanting to see. It was great to see Moff Gideon again. I thought his that Shadow Council scene was really, really cool. That whole part when he's walking into the room and they had like those red, like see-through laser doors, I don't know what else you would call them, reminded me very much of Phantom Menace when Obi-Wan was fighting Darth Maul, right? And they were stuck in those little rooms with the beams and all that. That was a kind of in my opinion, kind of like a throwback to that scene, which was really, really cool. That big battle at the end, was really sick. The ambush, I thought that was really dope. Yeah, just overall, it was a great episode. Look, this is one of the things too that I think that a lot of Star Wars shows, whether animated or even live action, they get a lot of criticism for like filler stuff, right? But here's what I always say to the filler. Sometimes, and I said this before, sometimes the filler matters later on. Like the space whale thing I said many times in Rebels, space whales. It felt like filler at the time, but at the end, it wasn't filler. Same thing here with the IG-11 thing. That whole IG-11 like drama in the beginning felt like filler in the first episode or two of this season. But it turned out not to be. It was something that really kind of mattered. Now it's something that is sort of helping Grogu progress. So that's one thing I think that fans should really keep in mind when they're watching these shows, is that what might seem like filler in episode 1 or 2 might not be filler by episode 10 or 11 or whatever. So overall, though, really, really strong episode. I give it like a 9. I honestly the same as Dre, like a 9, 9.5. Really, really top notch. Great Star Wars.
Nice. And Rogue Attraction actually gives it an 8.5, but what it means might bring it to a 7. We're going to get into what it means throughout the course of this episode in a little bit more detail. And then he's got some predictions, Rogue Attraction. So we'll get back to those predictions about what could be happening in the finale as well, because we have a question about that. So we'll get to that for sure. Aaliyah Aloha, what's up, Aaliyah? Aaliyah says that she gives this episode an 8. Thus far, her favorite episode was The Pirate, which was a really good episode. We got to see a little bit of what was that dude's name? He had a good name. The pirate captain. I can't remember his name.
Oh no,
seaweed face. I can't remember his name.
I forgot his name.
I'll look it up right now.
But here's the fun fact. While Dre's looking that up, fun fact: he had his first lieutenant or whatever was named Vane. And Charles Vane was actually a pirate in real life. Like Charles Vane was a real life pirate.
Dorian Shard.
Dorian Shard. There it is.
Avast there, matey.
Yeah. He even had the accent. He even had the Shmi first lieutenant too, like that other guy, the driver of his ship.
Go ahead and share my screen, OG.
Yeah,
can we get a shout out to the like serious Blade Runner vibes at the start of this episode?
Man.
I mean, it was just, I was just like, wow, what am I watching here? Am I watching Blade Runner or am I watching Star Wars or The Mandalorian? we had kind of Blade Runner references before, especially in actually episode 3, where the good doctor was wearing a jacket that was very evocative of Harrison Ford's getup in Blade Runner. And now we see, like, straight up, we got the neon, we've got the rain. I think what is it? What is her name? Can never remember.
Elia.
Yeah,
Elia Kane, I believe.
Elia Kane? Okay.
Yes, sir.
She's wearing a trench coat, very evocative of Harrison Ford's and so forth. I thought that was pretty cool. And I do agree with you, OG, when it comes to the what is it, the kind of the beamway right there. That was pretty cool. That was pretty dope. And you see the second version of Dark Trooper, which, by the way, is actually kind of consistent with Legends lore in a way, where you had multiple iterations of the Dark Troopers. So that was pretty kind of cool to see a callback there as well.
Another thing that first scene of Coruscant reminded me of. First of all, it's a great opener to this episode, but it was very much like a galactic Tokyo almost, right? Like
Yes.
It just felt like it's awesome, dude. I would take that and put it on my wall. Make a big print and put it on my wall. I love it.
I was wondering if they're going to reveal what planet that was, because it's obviously Coruscant, probably.
Yeah,
but I really
think it
want
is.
them to go to Nar Shaddaa, because
I really want me to Nar Shaddaa. I was hoping for that too.
I was hoping for that.
Jay, I was like, is this Nar Shaddaa finally? No.
No, not quite.
Not there
Not quite. I give this episode a 9 as well. I do have a couple. There's a lot of things that we're going to rave about, and I'll continue to do so. One thing that I will say that makes this a 9, and one thing that I think the show has struggled with thus far, is that when you have a story, there's really only a couple compelling things you can do, specifically with a story like what we've always seen in traditional Star Wars. One, you have to have a badass villain, or two, you have to have the heroes wrestling with what they're doing and whether or not it's actually bad or good, right? So we saw Andor, and Andor is very much like, what should I do? What should I not do? And trying to figure out what that means. In this episode, though, it was a catalyst for bringing everything together, because we actually got to see Moff Gideon back. And that brings everybody to the same page. We go, that's the bad guy. He's the guy that we have to overcome. Giancarlo Esposito is somebody that I could do an entire show on. I mean, this guy, like I had mentioned on Twitter, like, multiple people have complained about Star Wars dialogue, and they say only certain actors can actually pull off Star Wars dialogue. Well, Giancarlo Esposito not only can pull off Star Wars dialogue, but he can take really stupid Star Wars dialogue and make it Shakespearean.
Dude, he was like my favorite part, like one of my favorite parts in Breaking Bad.
Yeah,
dude is freaking phenomenal.
Amazing. Give him all the roles. He's just he understands what it is. Like so take Gideon, for example, right? Moff Gideon is a larger than life villain. He's a very much of a, I'm gonna come in here and act like all of you Shadow Council members are complete idiots. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas in Breaking Bad, he has to take any semblance of standing out from the crowd and bottle it up into this person who's like, you actually won't realize that I'm an international drug dealer because I go about my life in a very boxed, very controlled kind of manner. And so this guy can just play whatever role he wants to play. Like, he's just amazing. The only thing I've seen him in that I didn't love him in, and it was primarily because I just didn't love the show that much, was the Netflix show that you could watch out of order. It was like a big heist show.
Okay.
It didn't work for me as well, but it's not him. It was not him. It's not his fault at all. It's just the show in general was kind of, it was more of a gimmick than it was like a good story. Was that Theme Park Casual? Theme Park Casual was also in the chat.
Hey, Casual. Do we have the drop there for him?
Oh yeah.
Casual drop?
We got a casual drop. We got a casual drop.
We meant to play it this last.
Here we go. This goes out to you, Casual. We love you, buddy.
I don't know. Fly casual.
Yes. I've heard the casual drop.
And it feels appropriate, talking Star Wars. Got that,
Now we also have another Breaking Bad alum right here, the skinny guy. Can't remember his name, but yeah, right, there you go. He's in here as well. We've seen a couple of like Breaking Bad guys added to the cast over the years, but this is pretty cool to actually see. But yeah, Giancarlo, I it's interesting. One of my very first times at actually seeing him wasn't actually in show form. It was actually Far Cry 6, interestingly enough. Like that was
Wow.
literally so that game, not the best story wise, but Giancarlo was definitely a highlight of it. So yeah, I mean, like you said, Jay, he can take bad dialogue and bad story and really pull it off like Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And it really is remarkable to see.
Yeah. By the way, if you leave this on the screenshot you've got right now, the thing on his right shoulder, someone did an analysis. They did a deep dive into it. That is a battle droid head.
That's
What?
Yeah, it's a battle droid. Just a little part of their head. He's taking it off and he's using it as armor.
Stuff like that.
wild.
Stuff like that is all Filoni, dude. Like that is
Yeah.
all Filoni. Like that is so dope.
That is so dope. Yeah, it's
That's
awesome.
very cool. Very cool.
Wild.
Yeah, I didn't now I'm giving this a 9. I think this episode is amazing, but I do think that this episode did reveal the flaws of the previous episodes even more so, right?
Okay.
Because you literally got this and we're going to talk about this in a minute, but we got this an amalgamation of things that they just threw into one episode that to me, yes, so OG, you're saying, these weren't all filler. They were going to come to term later on in the show.
Right.
And I think that that's accurate. I think that that's cool. I think that was intended, but they all crammed them into one show. I mean, the number of cool things in this one episode is off the charts, whereas they could have, I think, spread these across the rest of the season a little bit better. I also think that you can see in this finale, and it's one of the complaints that that Rogue Attraction has that we'll get into later. But there's some elements here where you go like, oh yeah, they've clearly moved on from it being Din and Grogu's story, and they're just parts of a bigger story. Is that a problem? No, it's still a great episode of TV. But I would not have called this a great episode of The Mandalorian. I would have called this something like a great live action Clone Wars, right? Like it's not the same. It's not the same intent that they set out with the show The Mandalorian, where it was really about like what Rogue Attraction said is really about Din and Grogu, and then all of a sudden it's about all the Star Wars things. So it's a different feel. Totally fine with me. I'm just saying that I think that clarity is helpful. So when you hear people say like, I don't really love this aspect of it, that's really what we're referring to is like, oh, we were sold. It's like you go into Disneyland and you're sold like, hey, do you want to get a churro? And then you get a churro, but it's one of the ones that's like covered in blueberry. And you're like, I thought I was getting a normal churro, but this one's covered in blueberries, right? Doesn't mean it's not good. It could be amazing, but it's not what you were necessarily sold, right?
Exactly.
So
it's interesting because Jon Favreau was actually asked about that at Star Wars Celebration recently, and he acknowledged that. He said, "Hey, listen, this isn't quite like previous Mandalorian seasons, right, where it was a very kind of self-contained story." The relationship that Din Djarin has with Grogu and this kind of space western that took place there. The galaxy has to kind of rear its ugly head, as he put it, and be involved. And they are part of a larger story actually taking place, which is kind of what we got a little bit with Book of Boba Fett, actually, where, the events of Grogu and Din Djarin were very, very crucial to the story taking place there as well. Now we're seeing their role even expand even further. So yeah, it's a transition that should have taken place slowly over multiple seasons rather than like very much constrained to like a season 0.2 or whatever. I mean, it's very, very quick, which is kind of throwing a lot of people off guard there. Also, too, Din Djarin, has been kind of pushed to the backdrop a little bit, and Bo-Katan brought forward, which has a lot of people kind of nervous about what's the implication there. Is this going to be Bo-Katan and Grogu now going forward, and we get rid of Din Djarin? Again, there are some rumors where Pedro Pascal has had maybe his issues with Lucasfilm, the production of Mandalorian, etc. So maybe that is what this is. I think there are some benefits to it, but there are definitely some drawbacks. And one of those is acceptance from fans on that idea. We'll see where they ultimately go, but this penultimate episode has left a lot of fans wondering. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I would highly recommend going back and watching our Celebration recap episode. It was an Orange Nerd show that OG hosted, and we just talked about all of the fallout, and I mean that in the positive sense, and I mean that in the negative sense of exactly what's going on at Lucasfilm, and exactly why some of Celebration was amazing, and then some of Celebration was really weird. And we talk about all of the rumors about what's going on behind the scenes, and I think that like those things, what you just described, Dre, all of those things are what has affected this season and what has made this season real up and down. And so I just think that it's one of those things where, you know, it's helpful to know what's going on behind the scenes, because when you know what's going on behind the scenes, the fact that they could pull this off means that Favreau and Filoni are that good. Because any semblance of like being able to pull off anything with the kind of turmoil that Lucasfilm is in is kind of insane for you to produce anything that's really all that good. So I would highly recommend that anybody listening would go back and listen to that episode, because it was a really fun episode to record. I had to dip out a little early. I did watch the rest of you guys talk about what was going on. The Headland stuff is so funny.
Oh my god,
it's so funny. Definitely go watch that. You guys made me laugh. That was good stuff. For this episode, though, I wanted to get into just to give everybody in the chat a little preview of where we're going. We're going to talk about the spies, because there's a lot of controversy about the spies. We're going to talk about the spies. Then we're going to talk about all the stuff that we saw. And I'm going to list some of it, but I don't even list all of it. Like, there's like dozens of things that we saw in this particular episode that just like appeared, you know, like some of it was hinted at, like OG said, but like it's a lot of stuff. And then finally, we're going to get into the end of this episode and where everything is at and some of the controversy around that. And then finally, we'll get into the finale. So we've got a little bit of a roadmap that we're going to take here. But the next question is about the spies. And the title is The Spies, and that is plural. There are multiple spies, apparently. So, OG, who are the spies that the title is referring to?
I got two right out the gate. The first one is kind of obvious at this point. Elia Kane. Like, yeah, right? I mean, she's definitely one of the spies for sure, and she's fantastic. She's actually become one of my favorite characters of this season, at least. I think she's the actress who plays her is phenomenal. Great character. Her opening scene in this episode, it was brief, but it was pretty dope with the droid, the Imperial droid, and all that. That was pretty sick. But she's definitely a spy. Another spy on my list would be the Armorer, right? The Armorer is acting pretty suspect, in my opinion. I could be mistaken, but didn't she like dip out like right before the ambush? I didn't really see her.
Yep, she took all the hurt people back up to the fleet.
Yeah,
correct.
that was kind of convenient, right? That was convenient.
Well, some people have speculated that you're going to need a character for the perspective of the space battle actually going up. Above the world of Mandalore, right? So very similar to like Phantom Menace, for example, where you have multiple battles playing out. That could be what that is. You just need a perspective character to do that. But I do agree with you, OG. Her behavior has been a little bit like, it's a little bit too convenient. It's we thought that there might be some friction from a fundamentalist like the Armor with somebody like Bo-Katan, and we haven't really seen that take place. But suspiciously so. My vote, and to have it about face by the Armor, that would be, I mean, very, very significant right there. But she does know like Bo-Katan's story, and she's failed at doing this stuff before, and all this kind of business. So interesting. My vote, though, if you can share my screen real fast.
Yeah, I got you.
Might be these guys. How were they able to survive that long by themselves and do what they need to do? And what they didn't see Moff Gideon setting up anything. I mean, that installation that they all walked into, which is also suspicious. That must have taken years to form and to construct and build and all that. And what happens under these guys' noses, I don't know about that. It's a little bit like
it happens under their noses, and then they lead everybody to them.
Yes, exactly, right. That's what I mean by that that alone is a little bit too convenient. We'll see here, like they're going through, obviously escaping from the Great Forge. And then all around them, oh well, that's Moff getting a little bit too far there. All around them, it's like you have this architecture that's very imperial in nature, and they just keep going forward, and it's like, okay, that's weird. So I don't think the identity of these guys have been revealed as of yet, and you can see they were taken aback by Bo-Katan's let's say submission to the Empire in the form of the surrender to Moff Gideon and all of that, but they weren't like outraged, and you think they would be. Again, all very suspicious behavior.
Yeah, now Rogue Attraction has a counterpoint saying, why introduce no names to make spies kind of pointless? That's an interesting point. Like, they're not really like, not that they're not well known, but they're just kind of introduced like faceless, almost nameless characters. Would you agree to that, or is that a fair point to make? Or
fair point, but I mean, I just, the armor is interesting, but it's, she would obviously know, if she was working for Moff Gideon, for example, what would likely happen to her people if she betrayed them in that way, or at least a faction of them in that way. So I just don't buy that either. Look, the spies are here. They're in and amongst, the crowd here. You don't name the entire episode The Spies without them recurring multiple times in this episode. Right. Something's here. Yeah. And they played games with this whole kind of naming scheme before. For example, the Foundling, we all, kind of presumed it was the Vizsla child that was the Foundling, but in actuality, it was Grogu, as confirmed by Dave Filoni, actually, at Star Wars Celebration. Right. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and see, I'm 50-50 on the armor. Again, I think you have to go back to motivations, right? What are the motivations? So if it is the armorer, then her motivation is to eradicate everyone but her covert. However, she takes some of her most, like as Dre pointed out, she takes some of her most desirable covert friends, including Din Djarin, by the way, right into the fray. She just gives them up, right? Like, so what would be the thing? Is she a Moff Gideon plant? Well, that doesn't make any sense, because she could have been doing other stuff in the previous season. So it would be very odd if the armor actually. So I agree with Aaliyah here.
I think you need more foreshadowing to sell that throughout the series.
I think so.
It's not quite there yet.
It's not quite there. And they might have a good reason for it. There is some foreshadowing in this episode that's like, oh, we have to bring the people together, and Gideon wants the people to come together. And when the people come together, and so to your point, Dre, having those two guys, or the group of guys that was left on Mandalore, have them be the spies, kind of makes sense, because they have a motivation to like be planted there by Gideon, maybe. This right here, what Tom just said, the Rogue Attraction just said, Wolves and Koska are possible too. That would be my top choice, and here's why.
Ooh,
from a motivation perspective, if they were just mercenaries, they're willing to go with whoever gives them the most amount of money.
Right.
If Moff Gideon showed up, he obviously wants to work with Mandalorians in some way, shape, or form. If he showed up and goes, guys, you guys want money? All you got to do, you don't like Bo having the dark saber anyway. No one here wants her to have the dark saber. Be better off if it was in my hands. You should just come with me. We'll just take them over. I'll give you back Mandalore. You can have the planet of Mandalore.
Do we think too that maybe they were hired to break Moff Gideon out of that Imperial shuttle that was found?
Exactly.
That could be interesting.
Exactly. So to me, that seems a lot more likely than it does to have like the armor, who there's not. So the armor, because if you see the armor as the spy, you have to construct a lot of things in your mind that weren't necessarily shown to us on screen.
Yeah.
If you go with again, there's not a lot that's shown on screen for the guys that just showed up, which is why the Rogue Attraction's like, man, I'm not sure if that's what it is. But to your point, Dre, we're getting into new territory here, so maybe they're new people and maybe they show up to be spies. But who have been around this whole time and have totally abandoned Bo-Katan in the past? Well, Koska and Wolves. So that's where I would land with who I think the spies are. But we'll see. We're gonna know in the next episode who the spies are.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a question going around Twitter, and a lot of people were on your team, OG. Like a lot of people on Twitter, like it's the armor. I'm like Aaliyah. I don't quite see it yet, but you never know. They could definitely throw us into that space. Now, we got a lot of reveals. We've talked about some of them already, but let me just catalog some of them, and I want to hear which ones you guys felt like were the coolest. We had the Night Owls, right? So the Night Owls show up. We had not seen the Night Owls before. The Praetorian Guards show up, which are amazing, by the way. They're some of my personal favorites. Moff Gideon is now back. Hux's dad shows up. Like, did anybody put money down that like we're gonna see Hux's dad in Star Wars? I didn't have money on that. That's pretty fantastic. Gideon has new Dark Troopers. IG-12 is now a mech suit for Grogu. There was even a Thrawn reference, which we talked about. We saw the Shadow Council. I mean, the pure amount of Star Wars goodness that was crammed into one episode of television was pretty off the charts. So, Dre, which of those reveals or additions would you say, like, this is the one that I was like, I didn't know I needed it, but I got it and I thought it was awesome?
Man, this is quite a bit here. The Praetorian Guards are quite interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, their design isn't quite like the guards that we saw maybe in Return of the Jedi. That's closer to what we see with the First Order, specifically in Last Jedi. So that was I think a really interesting inclusion. That was really cool to see. I mean, these guys are vicious kind of warriors, and you know, they're it's interesting because the Mandalorians are supposed to be counters to the Jedi. Every single thing that's part of their armor is supposed to resist what the Jedi can actually do. So to have the Praetorian Guards actually, you know, dispatch one of their strongest, like in that fashion, I mean, that was like, whoa, you know, the game has changed kind of thing. This was pretty cool to see. But I think there were two really important things here that will probably take the top of the list here. One is the Shadow Council and the state of the Imperial Remnant as we know it. We know what the state of the New Republic is throughout this season, but getting a real idea of the power and plans of the Imperial Remnant at this time, I thought was really, really good. It does kind of seek to answer this whole question here.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Right? Which was notoriously mocked when that was actually included in Rise of Skywalker. So, you know, we have some maybe answers to that with Project Necromancer. Also, too, we know that, you know, not everybody's kind of showing their hand in what they're doing. For example, Gideon makes the reference to, hey, the clone technology, that's your stock and trade. Even though we just saw him with maybe some clones of his own in the, you know, 2 rooms ago. So that's kind of very interesting. We saw that Thrawn is part of this ambitious plan in restoring the Empire, maybe providing that fleet that we saw at the end of Rise of Skywalker right there. So, you know, it's OG's wet dream, basically, right? We're filling in some of the holes that were created with the sequel trilogy and making that not only make sense, but better because of it, right? In a very similar way that Clone Wars did to the prequels. So like the Shadow Council, I thought that was pretty awesome. But number 2, really, I mean, it's got to be this IG-12. That Grogu was given. And the reason I say that is because we've all been wanting him to have agency and autonomy and so forth, and IG-12 kind of provides a shortcut to that. We obviously can't wait to see him grow. So, you know, how do we kind of provide that for him? IG-12 is that kind of is the vessel in which that can actually occur. And so I thought that was like low key one of the biggest things revealed as part of this episode, because for so long we've had him in the bassinet or being carried or like even walking beside some people. For Luke Skywalker himself, he was force jumping him, that kind of thing. So to have him have this agency through IG-11, now IG-12, I thought that was really, really crucial here.
Yeah.
I kind of wish they had shown him go a little bit further with the suit, though, learn a little bit more from the suit about how it operated. Because what I wouldn't prefer to see is for him to show up in the finale and just be doing like the turning around.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
it'd be a little bit like, okay, I mean, could you have at least hinted that he was like understanding the suit a little better along the way?
Training with it,
yeah.
learning its capabilities.
And that's the route they're gonna go, dude.
They're
They're gonna
totally
go
gonna
for the chief applause moment. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, totally.
Yeah, there's no question. There's no question. So, what did you think, OG? What was your favorite reveal or addition?
I had actually a bunch. Actually, Dre, you bring up a good point about the Shadow Council. The interesting thing about the Shadow Council was that, we've never really seen the Empire sort of in this sort of scrappy mode, right? This sort of like scrapping for resources. It almost felt like they were in like the same position as like the rebellion, right? I kind of like that kind of. Hey, Lucas always said, right? It's like poetry, it rhymes, and that very much rhymes. That was pretty awesome. The Praetorian Guards were awesome to me. Yes, they reminded me very much also, Dre, of the Last Jedi. Guards in that throne room.
Yeah, which immediately after we saw him, I had to go back and watch that scene in Last Jedi just to kind of like, is this intentional? Yes, very much intentional. Very much so.
And I know Last Jedi, very controversial, divisive film, but the throne room, I think most fans agree, is a pretty dope scene in Star Wars. But I like that connective tissue, and I've always been like you say, Dre, I've always been like a proponent of like, the sequels have a big issues, but the best thing we can do with the sequels is make content that makes the sequels better, much like George Lucas did with the prequels with the Clone Wars series, right? So it's good we have great talent like Favreau and Filoni kind of filling in those gaps for us and making the sequels better. So I know a lot of fans don't like any kind of reference to the sequels or what have you, but I actually really do, because it's our only chance to make those films better. It's an opportunity, which is also why I like the Hux thing. I think that's more connective tissue to the sequels. Awesome. And our friend Alia Aloha here has a fun fact. It's actually played by Domhnall Gleeson's brother, Brian Gleeson, which is awesome. That's very clever. Made sure, they have like a resemblance. Also, I'm going to go with the mech suit with Grogu. I completely agree with you, Dre. I said it at the start of the show. That mech suit and that moment when he got in there and he was telling Din Djarin, no, I'm doing this. He was very resistant. He was telling his dad, no, he's putting his foot down. He was, like you say, he was getting his own agency. He was very much taking control of his own situation. He was growing up, right? And I like that a lot. We need more of that from Grogu. We need that. He cannot be in the baby basket forever. He can't be just a cute, cuddly sidekick forever. We need that growth from him as a character, and we're seeing it finally. One thing, though, that I'm a little disappointed with Grogu is that he trains with Luke Skywalker, and we have nothing to show for that. It's kind of weird. He's like doesn't really use the Force. He's definitely more Mandalorian than he is Jedi, that's for sure, which I get it. But I just feel like if you're not going to utilize your Force powers, then what was the whole point of the Luke stuff? Like, it feels a little bit like pointless at this point. I don't know. But the sequel trilogy connection, awesome. The mech suit, awesome. And the Shadow Council, just being this scrappy kind of like rebellion-esque kind of situation. I'm digging it. So those are the three for me.
Also, too, I want to expand your point there, OG.
Sure.
The scrappy empire, right?
Right.
It is very much like the Rebels, and it's like if you look at Legends canon, which is no longer canon anymore, but if you look at Legends material, the Imperial Remnant was kind of like that. They were kind of like on the fringes, and they were kind of like, scrapping for an existence, and their tactics change as a result of that. Much of that has to do with Thrawn, but you can see how they're kind of investing in more technologically driven solutions, right, to problems,
right.
with the emphasis on TIE interceptors and maybe even the TIE Defender, which was included in Rebels, and maybe that'll be part of Thrawn's master plan here, which is kind of interesting because fighter supremacy was more of a rebel alliance type thing. So maybe that will be a thing for this era of the Empire, a la, early First Order. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see to play out. But yeah, these Praetorian Guards here, man, that was pretty cool. Now, what do you think, by the way, guys? I wanted to pivot real fast here. And this goes to your next question, Jay, so I think it'll transition nicely into it. Mm-hmm. She has the Darksaber at this moment, right? She's not necessarily helpless to let's say, save Din Djarin or get Gideon in this moment right here, right? She can cut out a hole in this door in a very similar manner she did the door behind her.
Right.
Why do you think she didn't do that at this moment? Because this has been kind of controversial for some people watching it, saying that, oh, you could just cut the door open and now you can get Gideon and now you can save Din and all that. Why do you think she didn't do that?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could have been strategic. She might have just been kind of waiting for the what she felt was like the perfect opportunity. That's a tough one, man. I haven't really considered that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what happens if she would have done that though? Maybe they wouldn't have made it, right? I mean, they were outnumbered. So maybe her plan was turned out to be that it was strategic and it turned out to be the right move, basically, right. What I'm trying to say. So,
and I think some people were coming to that conclusion, OG, that this was like, if she would have opened that door, right, that she could have lost everybody around her. Right. And so it's the sacrifice of the few to save the many kind of thing. I think that was the analysis there.
100%.
Yeah, I think that Bo approaches situations, and I think this is why the Mandalorians tend to fail. The Mandalorians tend to fail because they all want to be strong individual warriors consistently.
Yeah.
I think that Bo is more of a leader, right? Now, you don't get both very often, but like Vader is both, because Anakin led entire armies, but he also will just be like, I'm just gonna take some mofos out right now, right? Like he's both. He'll do both. He'll cut it through something and just go for it.
Exactly right.
I think Bo in this moment is thinking as a general would think. Like, I can retreat and regroup, or I can try to step forward. But if I step forward and get slaughtered, everybody's dead.
Exactly.
Which is interesting because this kind of way of thinking was really hit home in Infinity War, of all places. If we remember that film, Thanos gets the stones one by one in order to achieve the snap, right? And one of the things that is really hit home by the directors, if you listen to the commentary on that film, is, okay, all these heroes in this story, right, are willing to sacrifice themselves, but are they willing to sacrifice each other for the greater good? And you see there multiple times where if they just let this person die or that person die or whatever, Thanos doesn't achieve what he achieves ultimately in that film.
Right.
And so the maturity of a leader sometimes is to make that sacrifice, not a self-sacrifice, but a sacrifice of something else, knowing that it would be greater. It would be, it'll benefit the greater good. So it's a really kind of fascinating thing playing out here with Bo-Katan, who, having the Darksaber a couple of times prior, been in this position as a leader prior, learning from those mistakes and applying them maybe here.
Yeah, she was absolutely the general, making that strategic decision, like you said, Dre. Beautifully stated. She just knew going in at that moment would have been more bloodshed, and waiting was definitely the smarter move. Absolutely. Go ahead, Jay.
I was just going to give you my top references before we move on to question 4 here. Personally, I think so. The way I would divide these up, and I think you guys have said these really well, is that the mech suit for Grogu is perfect for his character development and his character arc. So that was good. The second thing is, for the story itself, I mentioned this earlier in the show, but Moff Gideon has to show up for this show to be on the rails. we can go easily off the rails if we don't have Moff Gideon on screen. When we know he's the bad guy, right? We obviously know he's the bad guy. So when Moff Gideon's not off screen, we get Lizzo and Jack like just having a fun time in Bubble City. But when we have Moff Gideon, we have no time for Lizzo and Jack.
You may dispense with the pleasantries, come on.
Exactly. But while those things are essential to this show, the thing that I find the coolest. Now I'm gonna say that this is the coolest, and I am gonna double down on OG's comment about The Last Jedi, because I do think that throne room scene where they are fighting the Praetorian Guards there. I don't know that they're called the Praetorian Guards there, but there's Praetorian Guards. That scene is one of the best scenes that Star Wars has ever done. Now, I'm not a Last Jedi apologist. I don't even like The Last Jedi. I have to think of The Last Jedi as a standalone film, or else it drives me absolutely bonkers.
Agreed.
So, and I'm going to give you one of the reasons I feel that way before I start praising the Praetorian Guards. I think that just occurred to me now, thinking about how cool the Praetorian Guards are. It still is so frustrating that J.J. Abrams introduces the Knights of Ren, which are supposed to be the really cool group of fighters, and then essentially Rian Johnson turns around and goes, no, thanks, man. I'm gonna have my own really cool group of fighters. It's just like, could somebody please agree on what we were doing? But all that aside, if I take The Last Jedi as a standalone film, not the second sequence in a trilogy, which ruins so many things, I do think that scene is gorgeous. And I don't think I've ever seen people stand up to the Jedi and seem as ready to face off against them as the Praetorian Guards do. And so when they show up here and they're like, oh, we're just going to eradicate the guy that just killed, I don't know, dozens of Dark Troopers in Beskar armor. We're going to show up, act like this is a normal Tuesday, and just take this guy out and keep moving. Phenomenal moment. And I think that I like the way that they make a connective tissue to the sequel trilogy here. So just to say that was one of my favorite parts of the episode, but it does bring up some trauma from The Last Jedi as well. So it is what it is. But we will move on to question 4. Let me get your take first, Dre, before we move on to question 4.
Yeah. Okay. I have this screen ready for OG, if you want to share my screen right here.
Absolutely.
Yep. Very cool. All right. This is visually, I think it works quite nicely. If you study the choreography, someone pointed out, not the greatest, right? But still, visually,
there's some pauses like, I'll wait to attack after you finish
attacking. Yes,
even
right,
though I can kill somebody right now. Yeah.
There's some of that. There's some of that going on for sure, right?
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because this scene is not only like, one shot, but it's also like kind of slow mode a little bit. So like you really can study it. Unfortunate. Maybe not the decisions I would have made if I was Rian Johnson, but also, some of these guys were under the gun and their construction of these films, which was one of the problems, right? Maybe having a film a year, not the best decision making by higher ups and so forth. But I thought it was cool. I think overall, and them integrating the Praetorian Guards into like the Mandalorian in the way they did, I thought was a smart move, because I think some people do have problems with the Praetorian Guards and how they were so easily dispatched by Rey and Kylo, but because of how seriously they were taking the Mandalorian, it shows you the power of them and what this group here that you see on screen, Rey and Kylo, were facing when it came to this many Praetorian Guards in a room. So it's one of those things that strengthens an aspect of the sequel trilogy by how it's included in the Mandalorian. That's kind of this subtle thing going on there. And I love how you said it, Jay. I mean, this guy dispatched all these Dark Troopers wearing Beskar armor, and now this guy, who we've seen as a pretty solid fighter in his own right, against Din Djarin and some others, just gets dispatched pretty quickly
Yeah.
by 3 Praetorian guards. That raises the stakes here and raises the threat level considerably. So that is achieved as well. And it becomes a nice, what is it, cliffhanger for the penultimate episode.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, a couple things on that was like, in regard to that throne room scene, I don't think I've ever been like that shocked from like a Star Wars movie in my life. Like honestly, like that when he killed Snoke, and then they like looked at each other. I was like, oh my god, what the fuck is happening right now? I was not expecting that. Even though the killing Snoke thing was not the greatest idea, in the moment it was like, what is going on? This is crazy. I really had no idea where this was going to head. Is she going to go with him, or what's going to happen? You know.
And that was my problem with The Last Jedi, because like in the moment feeling like theatrical,
Right.
Momentary feeling,
The adrenaline,
of seeing
like-
some of those things were very good. I mean, I remember everybody gasping when Holdo pulls her Holdo maneuver in that in that film, right?
Right.
But right after that moment is over, it's like, oh my gosh, this leads to devastating consequences for the continuity and for what's happening in front of you and whatever. So it's a great thrilling feeling, but that led to, as you point out there, OG, an execution in which could have lasting consequences as a result. And so that's like one of my big problems with Last Jedi. I mean, everybody kind of remembers Luke throwing over the lightsaber, right? And everybody was like stunned and like, whoa, what is all that? But then when you really break it down, it's like, ooh, this was a really bad thing to do in this moment, even though it evoked those feelings.
100%.
I want to address this BJ Vincent comment, but just really quickly, because we're talking about it. It was a great moment in Last Jedi, and as a standalone film, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal to have that happen as a standalone film. What people don't understand, though, from a storytelling perspective, is when you take Snoke off the table, you force whoever does the third movie into 3 choices. You can make Kylo the ultimate bad guy, which they were never going to do because he was Ben Solo, and they were never going to be able to do that.
Right.
So you can't go that direction. You have to then come up with a new bad guy. A new bad guy takes you 2 movies, guaranteed, off the top. You can't do it in 1 movie. You got to have 2 more movies to do it. The only other choice you have is to bring back a familiar bad guy, and so then you get Palps. And so it's like everyone was so upset about that when the Rise of Skywalker came out, and I went, all of you people who love The Last Jedi are complaining about this. The person who did that, there's the movie you love. Standalone film, phenomenal, love it, amazing.
This is why OG and I have had conversations about this, saying Rian Johnson would have been perfect for a standalone Star Wars film,
absolutely.
something that didn't implicate the entire universe surrounding it, because
100%.
Dealing with the Skywalker saga in particular, and then sticking him in the middle of that, literally.
Right.
Oh, that comes with some bad consequences there that others have to pick up for now.
Right. You know what they should have done, and they never will do this because Kennedy and they're real protective of Rey, right? But if you wanted to make Rey a really dope ass character, like a fan favorite, I think the best thing they could have done is she should have leaned into the fact that she's a Palpatine and gone full dark side and just been a badass Empress Palpatine, basically, right? Oh, that character would be super sick. And then the next sequel trilogy, she's the big baddie, right? And so it just, it's such a missed opportunity. Yeah. I don't know, man. That really disappointed me because, like you said, Snoke was gone. It was perfect for her to go in there and fill that void.
Yeah, she could have too. That's a good point. That's a 4th option. She could have filled that void, and then you could have had Kylo Ren realize what it was like to be like a really truly dark person when he looks at Rey, and then he could have teamed up with Finn, right? He could have teamed up with Finn, and they would have had this funny relationship. Because anyway, let's get into we need to have a whole show on The Last Jedi recap. But BJ Vincent says, do you feel that Grogu stopping the fight could be foreshadowing a leadership position within the Mandalorians? What do you guys think?
Okay, I don't think it's foreshadowing a leadership position, but what I do think it's foreshadowing or sort of building upon, like what we talked about earlier, where Grogu is coming into his own. You know, he's growing as a character. He's more independent. He's not the little baby in the carriage. He's taking steps to be more of his own man, right? And I think that scene right there, it really is just another example of that. He's, you know, before he would just look, I mean, for the longest time, and it's been getting a little old, for the longest time, he would just be the cute sidekick. And that's no longer the case anymore. And now he's stepping in and he's stopping fights between the Mandalorians, and he's telling Din Djarin, no, I'm gonna do this whether you like it or not. See, this is all him coming into his own character, and he's growing up and he's growing as a character. They're fleshing him out. I think it's awesome. Absolutely love it. But I don't think he'll be necessarily a leader of the Mandalorians. I think he'll be an element of their group, but not necessarily a leader. I think this is more about building up his character than any kind of relationship with the other Mandalorians, in my opinion.
Could be. It's an interesting idea, but I do agree with you, OG, in your assessment of that. It's they're giving him agency and they're giving him the ability to do those kind of things. But is it specifically that? Don't think so. He's still a foundling, and until he proves his worth, you know, maybe that dynamic will change. But we might be farther from that than many might think. Also, too, if you want to share my screen real fast,
I got you.
We got to talk about this scene. We talked all around it, but I thought this was super impressive. This this kind of creature coming out of the I don't know, the underbelly of Mandalore and just like laying waste to the ship while you have multiple Mandalorians flying off. I mean, I was sitting in the you know, in front of this 77-inch OLED screen with a soundtrack, you know, going on, and you know, I got like the 5.1 going on, and it was just like my jaw was on the floor. I was like, holy smokes, that was absolutely incredible. I mean, you know, that's one of the best explosive things to ever happen in all of Star Wars, in my view, and yet it's in the penultimate episode. I was really kind of blown away by this. Maybe I'm overselling it, but I mean, my jaw was on the floor. So, who is it? It's Rick. I'm gonna try to pronounce the last name. Might butcher it. Rick Famuyiwa, I believe, is his last name.
Oh, is that how you say it? I've been mispronouncing it like crazy then.
I
would say Fujiyama or something like that. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So Rick Famuyiwa is I guess he's been elevated to the rank of maybe executive producer recently. And I mean, obviously they like his work and they think that he can contribute more than just being a director for a couple of episodes. Yeah. But really, I think it showed his talent as a director in this episode. Obviously, the subject matter and what you had to work with, you know, it's a lot more beneficial to your episode more than maybe, let's say, Lizzo or Jack Black is, right?
Right.
But you know, it is all about that execution. And I thought it was executed quite nicely, giving us some of the best stuff that we've seen, not just from this season, but in Mandalorian in general.
That was the mythosaur, right? I mean, we were supposed to anticipate that was what that was. I think, right?
So I thought it was the mythosaur, but then now I've gotten like, let me see if I can get a good shot at it. I've been corrected, and it's like, ooh, that. I don't think that was the mythosaur, or
really.
Interesting. Yeah. So I honestly don't know. They leave that kind of ambiguous.
They did,
and some people are saying it is, some people are saying it's not. I'm not sure.
Interesting.
Now, Jonas Campbell brings up an interesting point right here. He says, I think they're terrified of making Grogu a full speaking character. I think there's some truth to that, because Grogu is such a runaway hit it's like the biggest hit like Lucasfilm has had in like forever. Once you start messing with him, right? Even naming him was risky. I mean, remember that whole thing where everyone was just calling him Baby Yoda for the longest time. And when they named him, it was like, oh, wow. And luckily it worked out, but it could have went south real quick. When you give him a voice, right? And it's going to come under a lot of scrutiny because people love him as he is, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge risk right there.
Yeah,
So,
I think the kind of the broken speech, let's say, of IG-12, I think that's where you want to be right now.
Yeah.
And not necessarily giving him the ability to speak fully, because that really changes things, and not for the better. I think if you're going to do that, man, you got to stretch that out like a while. So we'll see.
Yeah.
A couple things I want to pick up on real quick. Just going back to the previous comment about whether or not Grogu is going to be a leader. I did want to point out that, speaking to what OG said earlier about Star Wars rhyming, what is Moff Gideon's goal? To bring together what the cloners did, to bring together what the Jedi did, and to bring together what the Mandalorians did, right? To bring those three skill sets together. He basically says that at the end of the episode.
Right.
Well, we don't know whether or not Grogu's a clone yet, but he embodies those three aspects. He embodies the Jedi, he embodies the Mandalorians. I think that there's a little bit of a rhyming thing there too. Moff Gideon's downfall could be the thing that he's trying to create, essentially. That's
fascinating. That's a very interesting point, Jay. He does kind of embody all those things, though, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've even talked about it on this show, like in past shows that we've recorded together, where it's like he's a very interesting character because of that, right? He's like a Jedi Mandalorian, and it's kind of it's unique. It's unique. That's fascinating, dude.
Yeah. There is this idea going around, and I don't know if you've seen this or not online or whatever, but there's this idea going around that the Emperor was, and it leads to how he came back. Let's say this.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Right. It leads to that a little bit. This whole kind of idea that he was attempting to transfer his essence, which I guess is a dark side power. Might be canon, might be not, but at least it's in lore. And transfers essence into something else. And even going so far as to suggest that maybe Anakin was going to be that vessel at one point before he got cut down, which is an interesting idea. Hey, maybe essence transfer was Grogu this whole time. That's why he's there, right? That's an interesting it's an interesting idea, but I think
that was actually one thing I was hoping was going to happen in Rise of Skywalker, was that Palpatine's essence or spirit or whatever was going to basically possess Rey. Right? That would have been like a sick kind of way to do that. I mean,
and I guess didn't Palpatine suggest something like that when Rey and Palps met?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would have been cool.
Awesome.
And it looks like that was a concept that they were going with, but they actually didn't include that. I think Bad Batch suggests that, like they talked to Namaste or whatever, the Kaminoan from Kamino, who was instrumental in developing the clone army, and I guess she was asked about Palpatine being able to transfer his essence into some other subject that might take his dark energy. And she said that it was impossible. So, not to poke a hole in your theory there, Grogu, but if Grogu was a clone, that would have to take place many years before, I would think. But it's an interesting idea for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
At least he, even if it's not, so from a rhyming perspective, even if he's not actually a clone, he still embodies what we think of when we think of the Jedi Order, with being Yaddle and Yoda, and you know what I mean? Like, it's an embodiment of that whole thing. I did want to give shout outs to Jonas J. Campbell, who's joined us in the chat. And we started the episode, Jonas, by saying that Giancarlo Esposito was a boss. And so we have full agreement with that perspective. He is amazing. Lovelo is in there as well. Tom, the Rogue Attraction, has been very active. Thank you, Tom. We really appreciate that. Thanks for being active in the chat. And I think I missed Peter Griffin, which we have a cameo from Peter Griffin in the chat, which is
We
amazing.
got Peter Griffin in the house.
Peter Griffin's in the house, and then there he is.
Do you have your Star Wars Peter Griffin drop there?
Oh, I do have my Star Wars Peter Griffin drop. Let's go ahead. That's a good call, Dre. That's a Rogo call. Hold on. That's why you're producer Dre. Here we go. Here we go. Let me get that for you real quick. There we go.
Perfect. And we also had Kevin Davis. Kevin Davis was also in the chat. So just shout out to all those.
Absolutely.
Folks, thank you for joining us here. So let's we got two more things to talk about. We want to talk about how this episode ends, and then we're going to predict what happens in the finale. This episode ends with Din is captured. The Mandalorian fleet is under attack. It will at least will be very soon, because we see the interceptors and the bombers launching, which, by the way, is another amazing moment. I love that when the TIE interceptors are hanging down and their wings go click like that out, and then they come down. So cool, man.
Go and share my screen, OG.
Oh, I got you.
I mean, that is some really cool stuff right there. Hanging out like
that
bats.
is badass. Yeah.
I think I got a nerd boner. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Paz Vizsla dies. So we talked about how amazing that moment was too, because Paz Vizsla basically says that I think that also gives credence to the fact that if Bo doesn't retreat, then they're all dead, because otherwise his sacrifice is just stupidity, right? So the fact that he does that is good, and really an amazing moment. Moff Gideon has revealed his ultimate plan, which is to build an army of soldiers with Jedi, Mandalorian, and cloner tech, which is wild, which is super wild and crazy. And despite the fact that a lot happened in this episode, some have complained, and I do recognize that complaint as being somewhat valid, is that, sort of we're back to, episode 7 of season 2. It feels like feels like we're kind of back in the same. It's almost kind of like when you hear that Palpatine and Vader are like, what should we do? I don't know. Let's build a second Death Star. It's like, we're kind of back into that. Maybe it rhymes. Maybe that's cool. But I just thought, what did you guys think of that? How did you think about the way that this one ended? And do you see it as a bummer, or do you see it as like kind of a cool aspect of the show?
You can see where they were kind of going when writing this season, right? And then it's like you had to inject a whole bunch of other stuff into it. And like, how do we make that make sense in 8 episodes, some of them 30 minutes long? Like now we're in this kind of position where we're flip-flopping everywhere, and it's not necessarily a continuation of the second season, but it's kind of its own thing, and then it continues from the second season, at least at various points. So it is an interesting idea, Jay, that it seems let's say out of sync, misconfigured, or out of place at various times this season. At least certain storylines and concepts. I think they are kind of dropping some stuff now in order so that the seeds grow into something, with more that manifest themselves later on and come into fruition later, right? Mm-hmm. And in a way that's really satisfactory. But Filoni has this process, and doing it this hard in this season has got a lot of people like, I don't know what to take away from this season. Even though this episode was really good, it's completely almost disjointed from some of the things that we've seen before.
Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that disjointedness comes from firing Gina Carano, because that led to other things like the what is it, the Rangers of the Republic? Yep. I believe it was called
Rangers of the New Republic.
What was that?
Rangers of the New Republic.
Yes. I believe that was part of the reason why that show got canned, and so I think they're having to kind of they had storylines for all this stuff, and now they have to inject it into this show because that stuff didn't work out. And I think they're trying to make the best of what they got here, trying to And you can kind of tell, right? You can kind of tell. Hopefully, like Filoni and Favreau can get in there and really kind of tie this up in a nice clean way. But unfortunately, I think that's what's plaguing it. Also, I think the drama with Pascal, Pedro Pascal. I mean, that's also, I think, a big factor here. He's a big unknown. You know, I mean, with the future with him in this show is a huge question mark. We know there was drama behind the scenes with him in Lucasfilm. I think that's also kind of influencing their story decisions with this, because you might have a Mandalorian season 4 without Pedro in it out of basically necessity. I mean, because he's not going to do it anymore. So I think that's affecting what they're doing here too. And it's unfortunate because I think the story is suffering a little bit from that.
Just imagine if, like, you take a really great cohesive piece like Andor, for example, right?
Right.
And it has a set story that it's trying to tell. Well, what would happen if the lead for that somehow, like, just, you know, walked away or did something where he would be excised from that storyline? Well, now you'd have a problem if you were in the middle developing that show, right?
Right.
And I think, you know, this is very analogous to what actually happened with Rangers of the New Republic, which I think had a lot of, you know, the specific threads that we're seeing in season 3. Now that, you know, that has to be injected now into the Mandalorian, and kind of it feels forced, right? And I think, well, it should, because it was based on everything that actually went on behind the scenes. It just tells you, and I gotta blame Kathleen Kennedy for this. I do, you know, when you don't have when you don't necessarily know how to manage an operation, especially one that can be as sprawling as Star Wars. And this goes back to even the sequel trilogy, right? Where it's like, we're not going to have a plan. We're just going to give it off to, you know, individual directors, and they can kind of go ahead and run with it. Well, we have The Last Jedi, we have Colin Trevorrow, we have all this kind of stuff that happens even then. Then maybe you don't actually enforce a strict social media policy. Well, you have Gina Carano spouting off, and now we have to get rid of her. But that has implications for the Mandalorian and the Mandoverse, and it's a mess. So again, this is why I'll repeat it here: gotta get rid of Kathleen Kennedy. It's just it's a shadow that's lingering over this whole thing. And if this feels disjointed, well, now you ultimately know why.
Well, and she's just like, she just takes all the fun out of the room. And just to be completely honest with you, it's almost like just the announcement itself would like unite the fandom almost overnight. Like it needs to happen, and they got it's just time, you know. And look, she's a talented woman. She's a great producer. I mean, I'm not saying she's, you know, but in this role, she's not fit for it, right? I mean, you can be the best. Look, you can be Michael Jordan with basketball, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily a good coach, though, right? And I think that's kind of where we're at with her. And I think it's just time to get someone else in there and move on.
You could be an amazing player turned offensive coordinator, right? But when you're put in that head coach position and season after season after season, you're doing like what is it, like 3-14, 3-14, 3 wins, 14 losses, 5 wins, 11 losses, or how many games are in the NFL now? When you do that over and over again, now it's like, okay, well, you're just not fit for this role. You could be very, very talented as somebody who is an offensive coordinator who was a former player, but it's just not qualified for the role that you sit in right now. And for Kathleen Kennedy, that's executive producer over everything. That's running the actual studio day to day, mapping out these worlds, these various franchises within this franchise and so forth. Hey, that's big shoes, you know. And even George, to a certain extent, couldn't even manage it that well himself, because expanding universe would trip over sometimes George's vision, and George would have to go back in and kind of rewrite some stuff, set some stuff down, and all that kind of stuff, right? It does take just a crazy visionary in order to kind of map out all this stuff and ensure the day-to-day operations of the studio actually go smoothly. It's just, maybe that should be a 2-person position. Maybe that shouldn't have been limited to just Kathleen Kennedy exclusively. Maybe Disney themselves should take more of an ownership role while the studio was being reestablished, right? Because I say this all the time, Marvel was a turnkey operation, right? You just bought it. They were already producing films. You give them a little bit more money. you ask a little bit more back in return, right?
Bada
That's
bing.
it. Bada bing, bada boom, done.
the door.
Pixar very similar in that they were already producing films. They already had a studio in Emeryville. They had this, they had that, whatever. Buy them out, apply a little bit of money, ask for a little bit back. There you go. Star Wars was not that way. They hadn't produced a feature film since 2005 when they were actually purchased. That was at that time, 8 years ago or prior to that, right? So, and they were producing maybe some Clone Wars content, and that was it. But now you want them to like turn into the studio powerhouse where they're producing one film every single year. And now we're producing these series and stuff like that. That's a big, what is it? The content output is completely accelerated at that point, right? And maybe Disney should have, shepherded that just a little bit as that transition was actually taking place, and not putting it all on Kathleen Kennedy to do that by herself, right? So we can be fair. That being said, it's time.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you got to be also fair about, though, in regards to putting people in leadership, is that, and I've encountered this several times, even just in my personal life, is that sometimes the person you put so anybody that you put at the top is going to have giant holes in their game. Like it's just we are, as human beings, you can't ask Bob Iger to go grab a drawing chart and make the next greatest ride and then go out and build it himself and then go out and promote it himself. Like Bob Iger he's not capable of doing that. He has a limited skill set and needs a lot of other kinds of skill sets around him to be able to execute on the final vision. Iger is like your traditional president, CEO, visionary. This is the direction we're going in. Everybody, this is what I kind of need from you. I get the impression that Kathleen Kennedy is being asked to be that, but is not that. So if you are her, what you have to think about is, well, who's my number two? And how do I get somebody in my number two position that has all of the things that I don't have, right? And that's one of the things that she just really has not been able to do. So she's in a little bit of a different position than Kevin Feige is, for example, because at this point, Kevin Feige feels like what he needs is like the ability to hire a number two who's of value, because some of the number twos he's had recently have not been great of value, and we see that playing itself out. Right. Whereas Kennedy has never had she's never even, at least from what we can tell, maybe in the early days she wanted Favreau to be that person, but Favreau has never materialized into that person because he's been limited to his Mandalorian role. And so it's just a little bit of a weird thing to watch from the exterior, but I totally agree. Like at this point, I think that Star Wars needs, new leadership in general. Yeah. Like not even, we need to figure out what somebody needs to take this is the old analogy. Somebody needs to take the bus. There's a driver on the bus. There's a mechanic that needs to fix the bus when the bus breaks down. There's people that need to entertain other people on the bus, or somebody that's got to have like making sure that all the tech is working on the bus. There's all these roles that are on the bus, and all the roles seem to be in the wrong place and scrambled up. And somebody needs to come in and go like, no, this role is for you. This role is for you. This is the direction we're going. Thank you very much. Let's do it. So I totally agree. We're all on the same page here.
Real quick before we move on to our next question. One of the things I've noticed with Kathleen Kennedy that does sort of it's a red flag in my opinion, and I could be reading the room wrong, totally. But like you mentioned, Jay, she needs like a number two, right? Like a VP almost, right? Or and I feel like she doesn't want that though. That's the problem, right? Like,
that's exactly it.
That's exactly like I feel like the people that she could have, like a Favreau, she's sort of kneecapping on purpose. Like, for example, right, at Star Wars Celebration, Filoni gets his own movie, which is great. I mean, I'm all for it. That's awesome. The Mandoverse, is going to culminate in this big movie. Awesome. Freaking dope. Don't you find it weird, though? Favreau's the guy with all the movie experience, and he's done stuff with the MCU. I mean, he launched the entire MCU with Iron Man. He's got all kinds of chops, and he's not part of that at all. Why? Why isn't he part of that? Because she knows he's on the short list to replace her, and she doesn't. I don't think she wants to give him that cachet, so to speak, right? That's a big thing. The Kevin Feige thing. The Kevin Feige Star Wars movie was DOA on arrival, because if Feige comes and plays in her sandbox and crushes that Star Wars movie, that's not good for Kennedy. She can't be having that. There's no way. So I think there's a lot of that going on here, like this corporate politics where she's purposely sort of keeping the people that might replace her at arm's length. That's just my kind of conspiracy theory.
100%. 100%.
To back that up, look at the people who have the kind of chops to run their own studios. Rian Johnson leaves to do his own series, making a ton of money for Netflix at this point. J.J. Abrams, I don't need this hassle. I don't need to play in this sandbox. I've got my own thing I can go run and do. So she seems to repel the people that she could be utilizing to step up into bigger roles and make a bigger impact on what Star Wars is doing. So it's just a very odd. Somebody someday will make a fantastic case study out of it, and we'll all go, I remember that. I remember that.
I remember living through that actively, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that'll be fantastic. And look, I'll give it to Kathleen Kennedy. She was asked to basically turn Star Wars into a content powerhouse, the likes of which even George Lucas himself didn't do, right? And it's like, we want you to launch, not just Star Wars episodic films, the solo films and all that kind of stuff, and then do it again here with these series and so forth. A lot on your plate, right? But how she's gone about doing that has been, if there was a path to be successful, she did the exact opposite. And Kevin Davis says here, Kathleen Kennedy has brought in money for Lucasfilm. Oh yeah, she's brought in a lot of money, but it's been diminishing returns if you've seen those the box office financials, right? Or even the series viewership, let's say, instead of the box office, right? It has gone down, right? So again, are we expanding Star Wars or is it contracting? Right now, it feels a little bit more like contraction. Even the retail sales, right? There are articles in 2017 detailing how Star Wars sales were down back at that time period, 2017, 2018. And while Grogu might have provided a nice bump at a time when they needed it the most, right? That's not going to keep Star Wars afloat forever. So you need to create something that provides a little bit more sustainability for Star Wars, and unfortunately that really hasn't emanated from Kathleen Kennedy herself. So it's like, what is she doing there? Why are we doing this if she's not giving Jon Favreau a movie, which is so obvious to do? I mean, that should have been ironed out years ago, frankly, as soon as he walked into the building. If we're I don't know, giving the what is it, the Star Wars film responsibilities to somebody, Charmin Obey-Chinoy, right? It's like, okay, what? No experience whatsoever outside of a couple of Miss Marvel episodes. It's like, what are we doing here? Like we got to get our priorities straight. We have great talented people in the building, or people who would like to come to Lucasfilm who feel they can't because, well, Kathleen Kennedy's in charge. And what does she say when evaluating new talent for Star Wars projects? She doesn't go, "Oh, you're a big Star Wars fan. You have an amazing story in which to provide for us that maybe coincides with what we're doing. Great." She says, what do they have to say? What's their message? What are they really passionate about? She's not talking about Star Wars. She's talking about other things. That's a horrible way to evaluate talent, and it's why maybe the output coming from Lucasfilm hasn't been as strong as it could be.
Yeah, it's also the opposite of what Filoni is, by the way, because he doesn't come with messages. She's like Star Wars geek. One thing I want to say really quickly, I want to say two things, and we'll transition into the last question. Rogue Attraction said that's why we needed Lasseter. I've said on the OG 55 channel before, Lasseter to me, aside from whatever went on behind the scenes that got him in trouble, aside from that, he seemed to me to be the most Walt Disney-esque of all the recent leaders that have been in the Disney company. So just wanted to throw that out there. And what's that? Shout out to Retro Nerd Girl for joining us in the chat.
I'll tell you the influence of Lasseter too. J.J. Abrams admitted during the director's commentary on The Force Awakens that one of the things that he was with the advice that he got from Lasseter regarding BB-8 was doing as much physical comedy as possible, and that's one of the reasons why the reason why BB-8 kind of he flings out his little lighter and a thumbs up kind of motion right there. That was specifically from John Lasseter. Now, because of just that scene alone, I mean, we all remember how much BB-8 product was actually sold after Force Awakens came out, right? And how big BB-8 became because of that film and because of what people saw there. And a large part of that has to do with John Lasseter himself. But it was just that little comment right there that kind of built into what we see what we saw coming out of the studio. The retail line at that time. That's the influence, that's the power that Lasseter used to hold. And that influence not being there, it's detrimental to all of us.
Yeah, and Rogue brings up an interesting point with Lasseter. Like that would be, everyone assumes like Lasseter bring him back to do animation. What if you brought him back to run Lucasfilm? Like that would be crazy.
That'd be crazy.
Would that be nuts? And it's one of those things where it's like Pixar has connections to George Lucas and very much so, like through Apple, that whole thing, right? So it's crazy, but it's like not too far-fetched though. I mean, Pixar's in the Lucasfilm family. It really is.
Yep.
I don't know. It'd be awesome. There it is.
That really gets my lightsaber turned on right there. I like that. I like that a lot. It's an idea. It's an idea.
For sure. Alia has a really great comment. We'll get it to the very end, Alia, because that's a meaty comment, and we have another question to tackle regarding the episode, but we'll address that because that is very interesting.
And I do think we probably should have like a Orange Nerd show at some point about the critical factor that Dre just brought up that gets that gets looked over by everybody, and that is merchandise sales. Yes. So if you're going to have something linger and last, one of the reasons the sequel trilogy was so detrimental to the Star Wars universe is that you can't sell the merch anymore. No one's into it. And so that makes giant problems for things like Galactic Star Cruiser, things like Galaxy's Edge,
right?
Things like merchandise sales that you would like to have. You brought it up, OG. They killed it with Grogu. Merchandising went out the window. It's insane.
So it's in their fiduciary interest to buoy the sequel trilogy up, right? Because you have so much at stake regarding it.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely.
That's it.
All right, let's get into our final question, and then we'll get into some other topics that come through the chat as well. Let's talk about the finale. What is going to happen in this finale? And maybe most importantly, who's going to die? Who's going to die, Dre? Who are we losing in this finale?
A lot of people think it's going to be Din Djarin. I still say that would be very jarring if they did do that, because there you go. Well, I think I have it right here. There you go. I mean, it's a risk. It's a real risk to do that. I don't know if they're going to go that far, but I could see somebody like Wolves, let's say, sacrificing himself for maybe his transgressions, right? That we might not know about. That would be an interesting kind of death right there. Maybe a self-sacrifice in order for the greater good, the greater Mandalorian coven to prosper. I think that would be very interesting for sure. Din Djarin, though, I don't really see that, and I don't really see Bo-Katan dying either. I think that would be a mistake as well. So I think, if I were to vote for one or two people, those are my votes right there as of right now.
I have a couple interesting. To be quite honest, Jay, I really don't know. I don't have like a definitive prediction, but I have a couple people on the short list.
Yeah, let's hear him.
And I have a couple people on the short list, and I have a number 3 kind of alternative to dying, but kind of dying. I think Din Djarin's on the table just because they might have to do it because of Pedro Pascal.
Right.
You might not have a choice essentially because Pedro's out, and even though you don't show his face, you would still need his voice, right?
The way that Lucasfilm's being run, he's dying with his helmet on. If they're getting rid of him, they're like, no, you can't show your face, brother. You want to show your face? No, you're gonna die with your helmet on.
Exactly. So
they're gonna force his mask off in this finale, right? And now we're back at the whole do we do the waters thing, or do we keep it off because, this chapter of Mandalorians has changed somehow? It's an idea.
It's an idea. Now, here's the thing, though. I respectfully disagree with Dre on this. I think Bo-Katan is very much on the table because what's her primary goal is uniting the Mandalorians. Her death could be the catalyst of that united front. You know what I'm saying? You kill her off, and then now she ultimately becomes the uniter that she's wanting to be.
Killed by the armor herself. I knew it there. I knew it, OG. No,
yes.
Yeah, that's an idea.
That might be a thing, very, very possible. And that might also explain why they're spending so much time on her, is because ultimately she's the one who goes, But alternative number 3 is nobody dies, but Din Djarin meets the Mind Frayer, whatever the thing is called. So that would be almost worse than him dying, because you would have him get his memory, would be completely erased, and he wouldn't recognize Grogu or something. And that would be devastating.
The
and just rip your heart out.
That's interesting. I never thought about that, OG, but now I'm very concerned.
Yes, because that would be I would just bawl my eyes out if he looked at Grogu and like, who's this guy, right? Oh my God, that would be worse than him dying, dude. That would be horrible.
Well, no, this is where Grogu heals him, because he's got that healing power, restores his memories. Come on, OG, you gotta believe. That would be that would be really something right there. If they did that.
And then it keeps the door cracked open a little bit for him to come back. If they find a way to get his memory back, he can always come back if Pedro and Lucasfilm work it out.
Yeah.
So if you kill him off, he's dead. You can't bring him back, right? It's harder. If you erase his memory, though, there can be story devices to kind of bring that back, and then, okay, he's back on board. We'll see. That's kind of where I'm at with it, though. Those 3 options.
My take is that, so what did they call it at Celebration? They called it the Mandoverse, right?
Yes.
I don't think you can get rid of Din Djarin quite yet. I think that maybe he does get mind flayed. Maybe, we'll see. I don't think you can get rid of him, though, because if you call it the Mandoverse, I'm thinking he's going to show up in whatever movie Filoni makes, right? So he's got to be around in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
that's true.
But here's my take, because I don't think the armorer is a spy. I think the armorer dies to inspire Bo-Katan and to inspire the rest of the covert. So I could see actually the armorer dying. Other than that, I think it's going to be secondary characters, right? You might see like the axe wolves, or you might see the Koska, or any one of those type of characters. I think it would be surprising if we didn't see more of. I don't know the actor's name. He was in Top Gun Maverick.
Right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I kind of know. I don't. But he's part of the what is it? I guess they were were those guys the Night Owls? I don't remember if those guys were the Night Owls, or if the Night Owls were.
I think the Night Owls.
Somebody else.
No, that was Bo-Katan's faction, right?
Right. Exactly.
Well, can't play that. I can't skip around either. Oh no. Yeah, that's a good shot.
But that guy,
I knew you were talking about that.
Yeah, I don't think he would just show up to do one episode. So I don't think he's gonna die. I don't think so. Oh, there you go. Elia has the name Charles Parnell.
Gotcha.
I don't think. By the way, fantastic look for an actor. Like the guy looks like he's like. Oh. He just looks regal, you know what I mean? So Charles Parnell probably won't die. So I'm going to predict that most people don't die, and it's only going to be secondary characters. I think that there is a chance, kind of like for the reason that you're saying, OG, that Din might die. I think there's a chance that Moff Gideon dies, because you're going to move on. You're going to move on to Thrawn. We know that's coming. And I think that it could even be that Thrawn shows up and kills Moff Gideon in the middle of all this.
Oh, that'd be sick.
Takes his stuff, So we'll see. I don't know. But as far as the finale goes, I think we're headed towards, to me, all the things that we talked about that this season could have been heading towards are basically what the movie's going to be at this point. Thrawn is the big bad. Thrawn has to be defeated by the end of that film. Everything else is the factions arranging themselves to be able to fight Thrawn. Right. And so I think that's basically, I think you're going to have Bo leading that faction. I think I'm not sure what you have Din doing. I thought it was weird that he pledged his allegiance to her, if I'm being honest, because I thought he was more of a loner than that. But that's where I see everything kind of headed.
It shows, some people had some problems with that, right? With him showing fealty to Bo-Katan, right, in that moment. And I get that. I understand. Let's say if you include the larger culture we're playing out there, I think what people are running with when they see that. I understand that completely. However, characters are dynamic, right? They change over time, and they mature over time, and all these things. And I think this is an element of Din Djarin's maturity, right? Where he was at first he was kind of a rebel without a cause, right? Now he has a cause and a purpose and a place within this world, and especially him kind of dedicating himself to Bo makes a lot of sense for the greater good of the Mandalorian people, right? Yeah. Because she's very much like, I want to unite the factions. I want to make up for, let's atone for my sins, let's say. I want to, be on this kind of unity path, which is very much kind of like her sister, and really do things that would allow for Mandalore to prosper, right? Which is kind of different from what maybe she wanted to do earlier on. Now she's kind of grown in that way. And I think Din Djarin has kind of, there have been times in these previous seasons that have alluded to him wanting more for the Mandalorians as a whole, right? And to dedicate himself to somebody who's the rightful heir of the leader of Mandalore, but somebody who is aligned with what he ultimately wants. I think that was a natural step for him to make in that moment. Felt a little bit off, right? Because, that transition could have taken place a little bit more substantially, let's say, and drawn out over time. But I thought it was like a natural progression of his character ultimately when you look at the story points.
Well, I think that's true, but let me tell you why I think it's shitty. Because we were promised with The Mandalorian what we were hoping to get with Boba Fett, and now we have it with neither of them. And what was that? It was somebody who goes off in the galaxy who's like, screw you to all the other elements of the factors who were fighting, and just was doing their thing throughout. But now we have both of those guys, Boba Fett and Din Djarin, have joined factions, and now we've lost that character in the Star Wars universe. Like literally right now, maybe you could say Cobb Vanth is that character, I guess, maybe, but we don't have that character, and that character is a quintessential part of what makes Star Wars interesting. But when you pull those characters into the main story and keep them there, it loses some of that vibe for me. So yeah, I agree with you, Dre, that they've set it up. They've set it up to do that. I'm just thinking it's a dumb thing to set up. We had a character that we liked doing things that we liked, and you changed him. Like it just doesn't make, that's the part where I go, that doesn't make sense to me. Is it in alignment with what his character might do? Yes, like to your point. But is it in alignment with what I would like to see that character do? No, it's not what I signed up for.
The gunslinger that just kind of passes through the galaxy is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I think though that we've seen a lot of that, and I think there's a point where even that story becomes a little bit uninteresting when you have these larger things happening around him and he's not getting involved. So you can go either way with that. I will say the way it was handled in this episode and so forth, very controversial, right? But I think it is necessary if these things are to be combined to this kind of ultimate endgame conclusion film. You kind of have to bring him into the story a little bit closer than even I think where Din Djarin himself feels maybe a little bit uncomfortable even doing that, but he kind of feels he needs to.
Yeah. I think you had like the archetype character of the anti-hero with Han Solo, where it was like you kind of felt like at any moment Han Solo could be like, peace out, which of course he does in the sequel trilogy, right? Like, and I think that like that's what I kind of wanted to see from Din, as opposed to like I pledge undying fealty. It's like, look, you have a goal. I'll join you in this goal to accomplish this thing. But I may not be around forever because that's not the kind of character I am, right?
Leave it a little bit more ambiguous.
Yeah, leave it a
Right.
little bit more ambiguous. But, we'll see what happens. Let's get to some of the things in the comments as well. Aaliyah Aloha came up with the 1.1 billion minutes viewed, up 25% versus last week for the Mandalorian season. I'm assuming that's for season 3. Is that for this episode? Here's the clarification we need. Is that for this episode, or was that for this season, or does that mean the Mandalorian as a series was viewed that many minutes?
Was that the premiere? Is that the premiere episode of this season? Is
I'm not sure.
Ollie, if you're still in the chat, go ahead and let us know that. That's an interesting question.
Yeah,
please. And if you require more text to do that, you can also put it in the DMs. I have it up and right.
It sounds like, from the way that the sentence is worded, it sounds like that it was this episode. Nielsen counts all episodes, so it's all episodes. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I think one would expect, right? Because people are going back and watching older episodes before they watch newer episodes, so you get a bump when you do that before every single season. Is that right?
And she said something interesting here too. She said, I've also seen the claim that it's higher than season 2 premiere in any other week except for chapter 13 and 16. That's interesting.
Lots of interesting things there. I mean, let's not mistake. There's a lot of complaints about this season, but let's not mistake that it is one of the most successful things on Disney Plus, right? Like hands down. It's like it's amazing. Like,
I think that's why the company is confident in investing more into it, especially in the form of a film and so forth, right? It's like, this is keeping us alive right here until we can get something else going.
This is a very popular franchise, and it's going to have, like with any show, it's going to have its ups and downs. There's going to be bad episodes. I mean, and that's one of the risks when it comes to Star Wars on TV is you get it a lot more often, and when you have something more often, there's more. It's a numbers game. You're gonna have stuff that just doesn't hit. You know what I'm saying? And but I think overall this series is still very popular. I think it's honestly the most successful thing that Lucasfilm has done since Disney has bought them.
Yeah,
by far. I mean, it's become a phenomenon, and I think it's safe. I think it's gonna be fine overall. But we'll see. I mean, the thing that worries me though is there's a couple things that worry me with Mando going forward is the Pedro Pascal stuff behind the scenes, and just the Lucasfilm in general drama behind the scenes. It worries me. It does, but we'll see. We'll see how everything turns out.
I think Aaliyah has another really interesting comment here too. But Thrawn, she's wondering about. But Thrawn is in the Great Beyond now. Having not completed Rebels, I don't know what that means. So you guys are gonna have to explain what that means to me.
I think he's in the unknown regions.
Oh, okay. He's in the unknown regions of space. So he's not in the Great Beyond, meaning he's been killed.
No, he's not been killed.
He's out somewhere else. Okay, got it.
The space whales took him.
Space whales.
Yeah. The space whales got him and took him. Is this set after Ahsoka? My only question with the episode last we saw Thrawn was taken by Purgils. Is that a character?
Whales. The space whales.
Yeah. I need interpretation because I haven't caught up on this.
So
the Empire Shadow Council doesn't know Thrawn was taken by them.
No, I think they do, and I think he has made contact with members of the Shadow Council again and saying, "I'm going to return," and they're saying, "Okay, that's fine. It's just we need to plan for your return." So that you can make the most impact for the Imperial Remnant as it exists, right? I think that's kind of what they were saying.
And it seems like, based on what you just said, Dre, which I agree with, that maybe only a couple of those guys have been contacted, and so the rest of them are like, "What is this? This isn't even happening."
That's why I think what is it? Giancarlo's line where it's like, "Oh, you say that your Thrawn is returning and so forth," and I've not heard any rumblings about this or whatever. I don't know. You might be basically full of shit kind of thing, right? That I think Thrawn is communicating with the guy that Gideon was speaking to in that moment, right? but not necessarily speaking to the other members of the council.
I think that's exactly right. Yep, I think that's exactly right.
Now, just to kind of come back to the Nielsen stuff, Alia kind of elaborates for season 3. Week 1 was wow. So it basically
23 million minutes.
Yeah, then it went up to 2.8 million, and then it went up from that 3.1.
That's the 1.1 billion right there. That week 3.
Yeah, week 3,
yeah.
1.1.
Yeah.
1.1.
Oh yeah. So I mean, it's going in the right direction. I mean, that's good. It's going up.
Catching up to it. I don't know. But Retro Nerd Girl says exactly how I feel about how I wish it would have played out a little bit more. Like, I wish the story of the gunslinger continued for several seasons while building bigger plot lines. Slowly, it felt like the bigger themes were rushed into the series to make room for other projects. And
Rangers
that's
of
what
the Republic, folks.
That's what Dre said earlier. It's what we've talked about before.
Right.
This is why it feels awkward. So, look at Aaliyah coming with the facts. Aaliyah is with all
the
the
hard numbers. The
Hard numbers.
Oh wait, hang on. Do I have the hard facts? Do I have them?
Do you still got the
And the hard facts.
Do have the hard facts.
Nice.
You can't go wrong with a little Walt Disney.
You can't cut those hard facts out of your spiel, even though some people try to.
So she's saying here, week 1 for Mando, week 2 for Mando, and week 3 for Mando.
Got it.
Yep.
Yeah, which I mean, Mando's a big deal, right? Like, and people talk about it. I mean, every single week on Twitter, I got to close Twitter until I can watch the show because people are spoiling it. They're talking about it. It's insane.
It's now become a thing where I have to I have to stay up on Tuesday just to watch it because I know if I don't do that, then the next day it'll be ridiculous, right? Yep. So it kind of the way that Disney Lucasfilm has kind of doled this out has been very, I think, successful for the franchise. Alia coming in with the facts and figures, almost like a little droid, telling us the relevant information at the time we need it. Thank you so much, Alia, for that.
Yes.
Alia is like R2-D2 when he plugs into the Death Star and the thing starts spinning. That's what we're getting right there in the chat.
That's right.
Any other things you guys want to talk about? We did get a comment from Michael Wolfson who says Mando's on his way out. So what's up, Michael? Thanks for joining us. We had another great week of comments, so thank you for everybody for joining into the comment section. Love Low says, that's my problem with this season. It feels a little rushed, kind of like the book of Boba Fett.
Well, when you have these arbitrary deadlines in order to buoy a product like Disney Plus, and you have to kind of come to a position where you have to start filming at a certain date, editing by a certain date, doing the VFX work by a certain date, so that you can have things actually premiere when they're supposed to, it's gonna feel disjointed, especially if you add some gears to those works to gum it up, right? So I think that's what we're feeling right now. Again, Kathleen Kennedy, why aren't you providing the tools and resources by which these things can succeed even better? Maybe her hands are tied as well.
But to be fair, though, wouldn't you have the same sort of deadlines if it was theatrical or something like that? Like all these things have like...
She's done... This has happened before with the sequel trilogy, right?
Yeah,
and this is what I'm saying. This follows a pattern, let's say.
Yeah, big time. Absolutely.
Ludlow comes out. We'll go... Yeah, Michael Wolfson first. Grogu no longer needs Mando with his new droid suit.
Agency, right? Autonomy.
That's why... Maybe he's the lone gunslinger I need in my life.
That would be interesting.
The gunslinger.
Then Lovelow comes in hot. But it's still better than Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Wow.
Ooh, shots fired. Actually, I agree with that. I agree with that. Kenobi had its moments, but it still didn't need to be made. That's what my final take on that is. Hopefully with
yes.
Hopefully with accountability that changes. In addition, Disney Plus is no longer the big priority for Iger also.
Oh yeah. So, that's a thing.
What do you guys think about that? Maybe I'm not gonna ask that question because it's an orange nerd question. But is Disney Plus no longer the big priority for Iger? or where does it fit in his prioritization of things? That's a really good Orange Nerd show.
Yeah, it is.
I have some views on that, interestingly enough.
You
I
want-
don't know. Here's the thing. Normally we would reserve this for Orange Nerd, but I don't know when we're going to be able to film a new Orange Nerd with all this stuff coming out from the Parks division. So I'll just share my thoughts right here. In the event we don't, but Jay, you bring up an interesting point right here. Here's the
Aaliyah
thing.
brings up an interesting point, actually.
I would have thought that when Iger came in, it would have been a continuation of his idea for Disney Plus that he set out in 2019, and even before then, when the actual platform was launched. He said multiple times, "This is the future. We're investing heavily into this. It's not going to be profitable, at least initially, but we think it is going to be a revolution for the industry." And that our company's success might hinge on its success ultimately, right? So he put a lot of stock in that. I thought he would continue that. When coming back, he has put actually an enhanced emphasis on not Disney Plus, but legacy, right? On legacy products, legacy distribution channels, whether that be TV, whether that be theatrical, and all that. So I think it's still a big priority for him, and I think it's one of the reasons why he was brought back in order to make their DTC division profitable and not just a money drain like it had been almost without restraint up until it hurt Netflix, right? Mm-hmm. So I think he is putting enhanced emphasis on some other things right now, but I think there is a priority for Disney Plus to be successful on its own.
Right.
And so I think that's where Iger really is right now.
You know, it's kind of weird. It's like for a while there, Disney Plus was seen as like a replacement almost, right? Like this is going to replace theatrical and all this stuff. And then as the reality set in, it's now more about augmenting or like this ancillary thing, right? It's kind of like what VHS did for the theaters, right? It was like this extra side thing in addition to the theatrical. So I think that streaming is not going to be necessarily, it's not going to usher in the death of the theaters. We're seeing obviously in real time that's not the case with Super Mario crushing it and Top Gun Maverick and Avatar 2. Theatrical is still very popular, but it's just becoming this sort of other revenue stream for these studios. So I think Iger recognizes that. He's not going to completely give up on streaming, but it's just not going to be seen as like this the end all be all thing that it once was like 2 and 3 years ago. This is going to replace theaters and everything. And this is going to be the thing that we're all going to, obviously that's not going to happen, at least right now. So
it feels to me like what you're hinting at and what I was gonna say. So I think we're very much all three on the same page. I think that streaming for Disney is more a replacement of the vault revenue than it is a replacement for theatrical revenue. Or right, like you're looking at a business model that goes, okay, people no longer want you to release DVDs and they're out of the vault and you can now buy them, which was a big revenue generator for products that had already gone through their growth phase. There were mature products. They'd been through their growth phase, which was theatrical release and rental. And now it was like, how do you manufacture excitement for a thing? And we got vault revenue, right? So now with this new franchise storytelling model, with the absence of the vault being able to do anything, what you do have now is subscription revenue, which can replace that vault revenue because your biggest fans are now able to invest in your properties on an ongoing basis, on a monthly income, monthly recurring revenue type of basis. So yeah, I don't think it's. I think the priority for Disney Plus was getting set up so that it could be a competitor in the marketplace and not one of the things that's going to die off, because a lot of these are going to go die off, right? And so I think the bigger decision for Disney, and maybe this is what Aaliyah is kind of hinting at, is the bigger decision for Disney is, should we take our streaming service and make it more of a boutique service, and I think they're leaning towards that because I think they're going to sell off Hulu, or should you compete with the aggregators, which is the Netflix of the world? That's what Hulu kind of is. It's an aggregator. And I don't think that it pays Disney to play that game. I think it pays much more to go, these are our properties, this is what we want, and it's Disney Plus and it's a boutique. It's not, you're not going to get an aggregate.
To your point, there was a couple of articles actually being published around August of last year suggesting, well, I'll read this to you. A recent article from the Digital Bits has reported that Disney will no longer be releasing 4K Ultra HD versions of any of their live action movies, including legacy titles, with the exception of major titles from Disney, Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars, though Disney hasn't yet officially announced that they will be ending the release of 4K titles. So, and it goes into like, you know, what does this mean for 20th Century Studios? What does this mean for the Touchstone and all that kind of stuff? Obviously, things may have changed a little bit with Iger back in the room. I think a 4K release of Avatar, let's say, for example, I think that is coming out, right? Avatar: The Way of Water, that is. But I think you're right, Jay. It's not so much to kind of propel Disney as an aggregator in the same way that, you know, you can compete necessarily with Amazon, Netflix, all that, but to augment other areas of the business and to make up for that vault revenue. I think that's absolutely the case of what's going on. So it's not necessarily, when we say a reduced emphasis for Disney Plus, obviously it has, I think the business model for Disney going forward includes Disney Plus, right? But to maybe a lesser degree than people may have assumed in 2018, to OG's point.
Yeah, the one difference it has from the Vault is that the Vault is selling exclusivity. I think that Disney Plus is selling partial exclusivity, but the way that it, unfortunately, the way that it can't operate is it actually needs to create its own original content as well. And it has both. The Vault, you didn't need to do that. The Vault was like, we were just selling something that was, but the Vault model was anti-consumer. It was not
absolutely
what consumers wanted at all.
And
who was responsible for that?
Bob Chapek.
Was it really?
Yes, he was responsible for it.
But it made money like crazy. Like if you look at the Vault money, it was insane. Like it was taking, like it was a fantastic idea.
And remember, that was going off of the 7-year release schedule that Disney used to have for its own films theatrically. Remember? Yes. During World War II, Walt was kind of short on money. It's like, how can I get some revenue coming into this place? Well, can we re-release Snow White? And that was 7 years after its original release back in 1937. So it's like, okay, well, this is. I think this is a way to go. This is obviously successful. Can we do this with other films? And can we do this to them with this kind of 7-year interval to kind of like keep the brand always in the back, you know, the backdrop, right? To keep these films kind of evergreen and relevant throughout time and all this kind of stuff. The Vault concept was very much based on that original concept. So, you know, it's interesting how these things kind of evolve over time with the introduction of new technology.
Real quick, a question I want to throw out there, because I honestly don't know the answer to this, but it might kind of play into what we're talking about here with the evolution of the Vault strategy, right, and all that. Do you fellows think, and this is kind of digressing a little bit, but do you guys think that the live action remake stuff is a product of maybe not being able to utilize the Vault anymore? Like a way to sort of double dip into the same IP multiple times? Is that a possibility?
I think it was a way to augment the Vault strategy, at least initially.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So not necessarily a replacement of it, but a furthering of it through through live action.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, I would agree with Ray. I think it's like a partial replacement, because the reality is, so Disney's original strategy won't work anymore, right? You can't re-release movies and have people just show up in droves. And the primary reason for that is that the number of things being made today is just astronomically higher than the number of things being made when Disney was doing that. So you could literally be like, well, what's showing at the theater? Well, not really anything. Let's re-release a Disney movie. You'll give people something to do, right? You can't do that anymore because of the sheer number of releases. And I'm not even talking about just theatrical. I'm talking about all the stuff that's coming out on streaming. Like, you're literally inundated with content all day, every day.
The volume of it is unreal, which is
Yeah.
why you have, like, let's say, studios investing into established franchises, right? We don't have to build a base; we have one, right? And that's why it's like, why are there so many remakes? Well, when you have a lot of content being produced, how do you stand out from the pack unless you have something that has a built-in fan base?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so I think that the live action it's a way to get people back in theaters that is not a re-release. So in that regard, I think it is just like what Walt Disney was originally trying to do, and partially what the Vault was trying to do. It's just that it costs a lot more money to do it. So you have to be sure that you're going to make the money back up. And so far they've been able to do that no problem, right? Because like people, for whatever reason, are like, yeah, I'll watch real humans over cartoons for whatever reason. But it is interesting. I mean, it's a way to make money. So Disney's looking at all the ways to make money, and they're doubling down on a lot of them.
Well, and Iger just recently said, if we're not going to, if we're not just going to limit to live action, we'll give you sequels. So a Toy Story sequel, Frozen sequel, know, all these other Zootopia sequel, right? That's another way to kind of leverage your in-house product for a new and emerging audience, having things in theaters, etc.
The one thing I'm wondering if the Disney strategy is going to work or crumble around is that, and Aaliyah has talked a lot about this with me in the when we're DMing each other as a part of our group. The reality is budgets have to drop, right? Like budgets have to drop. We're entering a recession. Every single entertainment company is already like under the gun financially to figure out like exactly how to recuperate their costs. Their stock prices are generally speaking down over the course of what the pandemic looked like for them. I just don't see a world in which you can do giant budget movies anymore. No, I mean, let me say that again. You can do few of them. You can't do as many of them, right? Especially when you want to go after these niche marketplaces, and a lot of people have gotten a lot of money to make properties for the general audience that are niche audience things. And so I'm just wondering how that's going to play out, because to me, one of the things Aaliyah said multiple times is it looks like you're going to see animation budgets that don't go over 100 million, or rarely go over 100 million, right? Because you're not seeing every movie come out be Mario. Right. Strange Worlds came out and tanked, right?
Well,
so it's just interesting.
See, here's the thing, Jay and OG. I'm going to kick it off to you. I just want to say this.
No, you go for it, because I think we're going to say the same thing we talked about on the phone the other day.
OG, do you have that? Do you have that quote from Bob Iger's interview with Time regarding this?
I do not.
You don't?
I do not have it on me. No.
Okay. Well, so Jay, I will agree with you, right? I've been wondering this myself, because it's so easy to say we have to reduce the budgets for films. But with the infrastructure that's set up at Disney, I don't think they can necessarily do that while maintaining the quality of some of those.
Totally
I think it's been more of a creative shortcoming, right? And I think a lot of that's due to just people being spread too thin, having to create all of this content, but not necessarily having the talent to do that, right?
Yep.
So how could you solve the issue of budgets and how much, capital allocation that you're actually making towards this product, while also solving the problem of not having enough creators to do that? OG, now go ahead.
So basically what you do is you have a budget, right? You have a set amount of money, and you just produce less content. So more money goes to the fewer projects that you have. So you have better quality, right? But less content, more quality over quantity, right? So if you have, for example, 15 Marvel things coming out for the year, that money is going to be spread thin. But if you only have 4 or 5 Marvel things out that year, you can spend a lot of money. Each project can get a good budget, right? So I think that's kind of what Iger was talking about in that Time interview the other day.
A Time interview, he was very much like, because I thought, like you, well, they're going to have to be maybe a reduction of budgets overall, but man, Iger just has this thing about quality, and quality means money, and he did it multiple times during his first reign as CEO, right? Multiple times, it's like, we're going to take big swings We're going to really invest in our projects, really believe in them. And, sometimes it didn't work out. There were multiple instances of that. John Carter from Mars, probably the most notorious example, but there were others. But it's like, but how do you do that in this era where just capital allocation has to be so tight, right? Well, think about it this way, for example. Let's say you dedicate like $1 billion towards your studios, right? And that's between 10 different projects. So every single product gets like maybe like 100 million, right? Well, now you're producing a lot of crap.
Right.
What you could do is cut down on that. Let's say you produce 4 projects, right? And you can also cut down on your overall investment. Let's say it's not $1 billion, let's say it's 800 million. Right. Well, now all 4 of those things could get $200 million, and they could be really, really well done because you're not spreading the talent base that you have between 10 films. Now you're all enriching 4 projects that you really, truly believe in. I think that's Iger's strategy going forward. I don't necessarily think he'll reduce budgets because I don't think he necessarily can to maintain the quality level that he's looking for these films. I think he's reducing overall capital allocation towards those projects by reducing how many you actually produce.
Yeah, that might be exactly right, and it's not a bad strategy. I wonder if his replacement will also be able to do that. This is the reason I'm even bringing this up. I'm going to need to bounce in a few minutes here, guys. So I'll just say this, and then we can either wrap it up or you guys can keep going. The 90s was an era of independent films and much lower budget films. So you had a lot of I was teasing you guys the other day about I mentioned Heavyweights, and there was The Big Green, and like Disney had a bunch of these movies that were very cheap films to make.
Yeah.
And I actually love some of those films. So I do think you have the option of doing that, or you have the more option of doing looking for the Tarantino independent films. Now that's not necessarily a Disney sweet spot. That's more of an HBO sweet spot, a Warner Brothers sweet spot.
They did that in the past with Miramax, though. Pulp Fiction, that's a Miramax production, Disney production.
Well, see, there you go.
Before.
Yeah, so they have a history of it. So I'm just wondering what marketplace we're entering. And Iger is basically saying, no, the market. I totally agree with what you guys just said. What Iger is saying is we just do less, but we do it with the same amount of money. I'm wondering if somebody else will try to sneak in, like A24. If you look at the last few years, that A24 has been wildly successful, unbelievably successful at low budgets. And so it makes me wonder, how long will that be able to go on, and will more companies start trying to do that particular type of output? I don't know, and it'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out. But you guys ready to close it out, or do you want to keep going?
I think we're good. I think we'll close it out.
I think we're good. I think we said it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to go make dinner for the fam. So everybody, thanks in the chat for joining us. Long show, fun show, fantastic chat. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And stay tuned, because next week we're going to be talking about the finale.
Yes.
It's going to be insane. We know it's going to be insane. We just don't know what exactly is going to happen yet. Special shout out to Theme Park Casual. He's always the best dude. He's always promoting the stuff in the chat.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Casual. You can follow us all via the links in the chat as well. We would love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you're not watching this live with us. We heard a lot of the thoughts live. But if you're not watching it live with us, we'd love to know your thoughts on episode 7. Please let us know those in the comments down below. In the meantime, OG, where can the people find you?
Find me right here on YouTube, Orange Grove 55, with these amazing gentlemen, including Mr. Disney Family Man 23, who has a fantastic Walt Disney World show as well. But you can find me right here with all these fine gentlemen. And you can also find me on Twitter at Orange Grove 55, where, hey, reach out. I love talking about all this nerdy stuff on Twitter too, whether it's theme parks, movies, film, C-suite, Bob Iger, whatever you want to talk about. Hit me up. And Jay, I just want to thank you again for a fantastic Story Geeks episode. This was a ton of fun, brother. Thank you.
It would not be fantastic without you guys involved, so I appreciate you both. Dre, where can people find you?
Best place to find me is going to be on Twitter. It's right down there at @Sky. Just go ahead and type it in, and it should pop up. I think Casual also has the Twitters in the chat as well, so you can find our links all there. For if you do want to embark in that, for all the, as Christine Wissens McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion, you can find me there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55, where we have some amazing shows, including the one you're watching right now with Story Geeks with Jay, where we are breaking down all of the episodes of The Mandalorian as they come out. And like you said, Jay, the finale is next week, so that should be a lot of fun. You can bet your bottom dollar we're going to be right here breaking it all down. But we also have the amazing Citrus Corner, where we talk about everything Walt Disney World related, hosted by our dear brother George. Orange Nerd and Orange Grove, we talk about everything going on with C-Suite, and trust me, there will probably be some updates in that regard coming very, very shortly. And, well, you have my show there as well, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. Let's see.
Are you gonna fire up the saber one last time before we go?
Fire up the saber!
I'll fire up the saber. Let's find the on button for this thing right here. There you go, right there, right?
Yes. Sick, dude.
That's
great.
Gotta bust it out.
I love
every
it.
once in a
I
while,
love
right?
it. Yeah, it's great stuff. Thank you for that. By the way, Family Man George, our brother George, had a pretty big announcement today on Twitter. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Oh, I did not.
Did you not see this?
No, Family had a huge announcement.
Yeah, he did.
Wait,
I haven't been on Twitter all day, so I have an excuse.
I'm not gonna. I won't say because I want him to tell you. I want him to be able to tell you.
Yeah.
But I thought it was pretty fun. So
cool.
So you can follow me on Twitter right here at Jay Sherer. I don't have any fun announcements like George had today. But I do have this. I do have an account where I will say probably not that outrageous of things. But if you want to follow me, check it out anyways. In the meantime, we hope to see you all next week. You've been fantastic in the chat, and I cannot wait to discuss the finale with you as well. See you all later.